Welcome back to Game Over Montreal. I'm here for the first time in a while, it feels like. Just getting over a cold, so I'm sorry about the voice, but mostly here. Here with Sebastian High. Sebastian, how you feeling after that one?
That was the most fun I've had watching the Habs this season so far, and I enjoyed every second of it. You got to enjoy good Habs hockey when you're blessed with an opportunity to actually see it.
Yeah, seriously, it was a really strong game, I think, from both teams in a lot of respects. Two teams in rebuilds. I think we could probably compare the rebuilds a little bit at some point, but with the context that this is Buffalo's second rebuild in a row, so maybe higher expectations for them at this point. But a really strong game. We're going to talk about the story of the game. Usually we start every show with like kind of the story of the game and go over the positives and all that. But I want to talk about Struble. I want to talk about Slafkovsky tonight. That'll be in our last segment. But first, I want to start off. Let's get all the negatives out of the way to start with. I want to talk about Justin Barron because I have a couple theories about Justin Barron that I know people are really hard on him right now for good reason. He's struggling, especially on the defensive end. I think there's two issues with Justin Barron. One is very easily fixed, and I think one can only come in time. Number one, I think he uses the wrong stick, Sebastian, because I've never seen a guy have so many pucks hop over his stick blade. Either his stick blade is too short, like it's not wide enough, or maybe his stick is a little bit too stiff. He's thinking too much shot when he should be thinking maybe more stick handling and passing. That's just throwing that out there. Maybe the Canadiens equipment staff want to check that out with him. But the bigger thing for Justin Barron to me, and I'm saying this not trying to be mean, I'm just assessing what I think is happening with the player. I think Justin Barron right now plays like he's a better player than he is and takes risks that his current skill level can't cash. There's, some of that comes down to awareness and holding on to the puck too long in the defensive zone. You know, at the end of the day, you want your players to have confidence in what they're doing. And I think that Barron does have that confidence, and that's a good thing. But he's not at the peak of his development curve yet. And at times, I think he needs to dial it back a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, Barron's an interesting case. I think that with both him and Logan Mailloux, the Habs have two defensemen who have some really interesting tools. Like Barron is an excellent skater, really beautiful edge work. He can activate offensively really nicely. And we've seen him score quite a few goals already this season because he gets involved in the offensive zone. But going back to his draft year, his defensive awareness and especially his tendency to cough up the puck in the breakout in highly vulnerable positions has always been a part of his game that hasn't really been ironed out just yet. I think one of the big things that I've seen, like it might be a stick thing. I think I see it more with Barron when he gets a pass in the breakout. He is already scanning for his passing options, and he's not the most capable at pass receptions. And he regularly coughs up the puck. It's almost like in football when a receiver peeks to look ahead before they actually secure the ball, and it pops out, right? Like it's the same thing with Barron. And either he has to work on his puck control to receive those pucks a lot more fluidly, or he's going to have to make sure he actually gets possession before he starts scanning for passing options.
Yeah, thinking too far ahead, right? And I think when
For
Mike
sure.
Matheson is off of his game, he does that too, right? He's thinking three, four plays ahead, and he kind of burns himself a lot of the time. And Barron kind of has that same issue. I think that's why when the two of them were paired together, and Barron was kind of forced to play a little bit more reserved, it worked for a short period of time. But when they start struggling, it gets real bad. Uh, Same kind of thing is happening now with Gooley, where like Gooley's there to insulate, but I don't think we're seeing the best of Cayden Gooley right now either. I feel like that pair has taken more and more tough minutes over the last few weeks, and it hasn't really worked out. I think they looked good at the start, but Barron's seems to be the guy that kind of needs a push every now and then. And maybe it's time to knock him down one pairing and elevate Jayden Struble, say, who was fantastic tonight, and we'll talk about it in the last segment. But Barron is. I get why people are frustrated. The skill level is there. I think there's an expectation for offensive defensemen to also be great transition players, and that's just not true of Barron at this stage of his game. inside the offensive zone, I really like what he does. Handling the puck outside of it, less so. And he's got things to work on. All of these guys on defense are works in progress, which is why when people were getting really upset about Xhekaj being sent down to the American Hockey League, I was like, what do you guys think is going to happen? You think just because George Larocque says he's going to be traded, that he's going to be traded? I'll tell people this also about Arber Xhekaj. If he is traded, you're probably going to be okay with the trade. This is a guy that 31
Yeah.
teams would like to have on their roster, and one has. If he goes, it's going to be for wildly above market value.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if the Habs feel comfortable to at least dip their toes into the trade market with Xhekaj, they really could get a big return. And especially with a player like Struble already kind of taking that spot at the third pairing left-hand defenseman slot. And I mean, Jordan Harris is going to be back at some point, and you have guys like Lane Hudson, Adam Engstrom in the wings. Left defense is not a position of weakness in the Habs pool, especially for
Yeah.
young pieces. So I wouldn't be surprised if they asked around for Xhekaj. Now, whether or not they feel comfortable pulling the trigger, especially on a player that they kind of came out of nowhere with the Habs, and they drafted his brother just very recently, which was also a reach of a pick. They have a lot of invested in not only Arber Xhekaj but his family with the
Yeah.
organization. But yeah, you are totally correct. If they want to deal him, they would at the bare minimum get a contender's first round draft pick in return.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I kind of viewed it the opposite of the way other people did. We're kind of getting distracted talking about Jack Guy, but I never got to really say my piece because I haven't been on the show. But I kind of saw it the opposite way of the way a lot of people did when he was sent down. To me, sending Jack Guy down to the American Hockey League, coming off of an injury, telling him to work on his defensive game, my viewpoint from seeing that was that they now see more in Xhekaj than they previously did. They're saying, yes, you're super tough. Yes, you can score goals because your wrist shots somehow go through netting. Like you've got power behind you that most guys could only dream of, but you can be more than that. You consistently have shown improvement. So let's work on your game. Let's develop you even more. Like I think being sent down to the American Hockey League has shown that the Canadians are even more committed to Arber Xhekaj. So like the time may come down the road, as you mentioned. There's so many good left side defense prospects in this Canadian system that he may be moved. I don't think it's imminent right now. I think that this is a play on trying to push him to the next level to see if he can, move up the lineup. But yeah, Justin Barron, I do still believe in this kid. I think that he's having a really rough ride right now. Maybe he needs to be. Is he even eligible to go down to the American Hockey League? I don't know.
Yeah, he still is. He still is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be worth a shot to once maybe David Savard comes back and just let him marinate again. Let him work on his game a little bit, get his confidence back, and then bring him back up. But either way, I think tonight, the game tying goal, I'm going to give Barron a mulligan on that one because of the headshot earlier in the game. I know he wasn't good before the headshot either, but just that seemed like an I'm concussed play.
It
And
was
not
ugly.
to say that he for sure is, but I was pretty shocked that they didn't put him in concussion protocol.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we've had this drill in the past with the Habs. Like, I can think back of multiple instances in the past, like 2, 3 seasons, where we're pretty certain that a player should kind of just be retired for the game to get checked on, and they haven't been, and it's come back to bite them. And hopefully, that's not the case with this case here. But yeah, it did not look like a pretty hit, and the reaction afterwards was also concerning.
Yeah, yeah, he looked not well as he skated to the bench. It wasn't pretty. And, 5 minute major and game misconduct kind of turned the game around in a lot of ways and was the right call, which was one of the few that the refs actually caught tonight. Whether it was Brendan Gallagher trying to break Jeff Skinner in half, or
Twice.
was Skinner, right? Not Middlestat?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought so.
two
Or
shots too. He got two in.
yeah, and then or Caulfield getting tripped and then elbowed in the back of the head. It Officiating in this league is a horror show. It is really awful. It's not about one team, it's just terrible.
Yeah, it's not the strongest of the professional sports I watch.
No, definitely not. All right, let's get into the story of the game. But before we do, lots of people in here tonight. Make sure you remember to like the stream, subscribe to SDPN, and throw some comments in the stream chat here. I read them live as much as I can. Try to keep up with what you guys are saying. If you've got something you want to question that's off topic from what we're talking about, keep it to the end. We will do a little mini press conference at the end. We will warn you when it's time to get your questions in. But if you've got comments on what we're talking about live, sometimes we read them out. We'll shout you out if you have a good idea. There's lots of ways to interact with the show live. And make sure that you follow Sebastian at @high_Sebastian on Twitter. I'm refusing to call it the other name still. Apparently the only one who's holding out, but I'm not giving Mr. Musk that satisfaction. All right, I think the story of the game is pretty simple here, outside of it being wildly entertaining. Cayden Primeau. That was a hell of a bounce back performance after looking abysmal in the third period in his last start.
Yeah, no, I mean the first period was excellent as per usual with Primo this season. He's been lights out in I think every single first period he's played so far for the Habs this year. And that was no different tonight, but he continued it up in the second too. So I thought it was a very strong performance. Like sure, Buffalo got two quick goals to start the third period when you had a two-goal lead, but he was really, really strong the entire game. And in the shootout as well, I thought that he looked quite solid and he was beaten twice, but he did enough for the Habs to earn the victory.
Yeah, he absolutely did, and I don't think we could blame him on either of the goals that went in. Really, like
No.
they're pretty tough ones, you know. Like even like maybe you could say the Skinner goal he could have got across because I feel like he stopped 4 or 5 of those same attempts tonight. But the expectation can't be to stop like 5 or 6 of those every night. You know, it's pretty tough.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he had his fair share of high danger saves in this game. He was allowed to let one in too.
Yes, 100%. He was fantastic. And, I was calling last game that I would basically just throw him on the waivers the next morning. And I'm still not convinced that this three goalie situation is worth carrying around. But hey, if Kent Hughes ends up getting a nice return for one of these goalies going into the end of the Christmas holidays or something like that, maybe it'll work out. I don't know, but still not thrilled on the three goalie situation. I'm sure none of the goalies are either.
Yeah, it definitely restricts playing time for all of them, but if they end up extracting value from this, and whether that be selling high on Primo relative to losing him for nothing after preseason, or if they just get some type of return for Jake Allen, maybe a contender wants to have a proven backup with a lot of NHL experience. He's a good option for that, but yeah, like I was expecting the goalie situation to have been solved by like the end of November, so I'm a bit surprised that they're still going ahead with it well into December now.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of teams are just kind of sitting on what they have and not willing to pay the prices that are being asked. And I mean, I guess if you're a team like the Edmonton Oilers, it's starting to pay off a little bit, but I would still be a little bit wary of having to deal with the goaltending situation that they've got heading into the playoffs. They've got to find something. I don't think Cayden Primeau is a fit there. I do think Jake Allen in like a support role for
Yeah.
Stu Skinner might be a fit there.
I agree. I think that Jake Allen in Edmonton is about the best fit I've seen from a Habs goalie with any other NHL organization. I mean, it all depends on Jack Campbell, though. If he can stick in the NHL as a serviceable backup, then Edmonton really has no use for Jake Allen. But if that doesn't end up working out and he's back stuck in the AHL, then I could really see Jake Allen being an enticing option for the Oilers.
Yeah, Ben Dawson says Primo doesn't have a big enough body of work to obtain a sizable return. Teams give value for
Yeah,
sure thing goalies. I agree totally, and that's why I think the big holdup on this is that the only like now that Montembeault is signed, which I think is a good contract, the
yeah.
only goalie that can move is Jake Allen. Like it's the only one that makes sense.
Unless they just get an offer like a fourth round draft pick or something and they cut their losses with a three goalie situation. Like I could imagine that. But
Yeah,
at this point, they've invested a lot of time into Cayden Primeau and taking a lot of valuable starts away from their projected starter now over the next couple of years, Samuel Montembeault over the past couple of months. That would be a little bit probably disappointing as a return for carrying the three goalies, but it's going to have to shake out at some point because you're not going to see the Habs carry three goalies this entire season, I don't think.
I surely hope not. Like, how much longer can they keep going that way? Uh, Other stuff that caught my eye in this game. I know that they didn't, pile on an avalanche of goals on the power play or anything, but as opposed to the usual story with the Canadians, I thought the special teams tonight were pretty spectacular. Like they allowed their fair share of chances while on the PK, but they were in it. Like they were keeping pucks to the outside for most of it. They had several heroic PK shifts. So that Mike Matheson in particular tonight
Yeah.
on the defensive side of the puck, man, where has that guy been? Like I know that you can't expect that guy to show up every like 82 games. It's impossible. But he was astonishingly good on the penalty kill tonight, whether he had his stick or not.
Yeah, and he was a ton of fun tonight. I love watching Mike Matheson play, and especially that play without the stick, not only to get the puck out of the zone, but to then spark a counterattack where Christian Dvorak actually gained possession in the offensive zone against Rasmus Dahlin, who had a stick, is
Yep.
really impressive. And Dahlin is one of the two or three best skaters in the entire world at this stage. He's just a really, really wonderful skater, but Mike Matheson beat him in that one-on-one despite lacking a stick, which was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a really really impressive shift. Just I feel like the strength and balance that he put on display there in not only out muscling Darlene at the line and then out racing him, but keeping up with him without a stick to put pressure and not allowing Darlene to deke him out at the blue line. Like just incredible series of reactions from Mike Matheson in applying pressure. I find so many players without a stick play so conservatively, and I don't get it. And like Matheson has the advantage of the fact that he's like a physical freak and like stronger than his size and a super good skater. But when you don't have a stick, just take a guy out, man. Like just go after the puck. Let the rest of your team figure it out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And he then also got a decent pass in with his skate afterwards. So he completed the whole sequence. But yeah, he was a ton of fun tonight. There's also another PK sequence that was less pretty, but he like splayed himself out at the foot of the crease to make sure that the puck didn't get across. And he's been really, really solid since being traded to the Habs. Like I'm a big fan of Mike Matheson, and he's very much kind of leading the way and showing what a number one defenseman should look like with this organization. And while he's not going to be that solution long term, you have a lot of young defensemen, as we were talking about earlier, that can really learn from him, which is just great to see.
It really is. And I don't think he's like an actual number one defenseman. I think he's like on a good team,
Fringe.
probably a
Yeah,
number
he's a
three
fringe.
guy, but he's been great.
Number
He's
two. I
been,
put him number two. I'm a very
you
big
think
fan
he's a
of
number
Mike
two?
Matheson. I think
I
he's a shoe in number two on the vast majority of teams, both on both sides of the puck with how he uses his skating. He has a bit of that Jeff Petrie effect of just like improving year on year well into his late 20s. And of course, we're going to see a dip at some point, especially for a player that relies so much on his mobility to create advantages. But I'd say for the next like 2 to 3 seasons, he's a pretty solid bet for a first pairing defenseman, even on contending team.
yeah, I do wonder if at some point they get Gooley playing on his offside and just put him with Matheson and have like a real top pairing. Because if there's one thing I think Matheson needs right now, it's to not have to carry around somebody who's not prepared to play those kinds of minutes. And I know that he's scored some
Yeah.
goals, but I'm kind of tired of Lindstrom. Like there was several plays tonight where he just wasn't ready for a pass, or a pass was sent to him along the wall. He's under no pressure, and he just bobbles it and loses all the time and space that he had. And I find like that kind of stuff. It's the same issue that Barron was having tonight, right? It just gets frustrating because your teammates can't rely on you to do the simple things, and that's not his fault. He shouldn't be playing on the first pair. That's a coaching decision that's out of Lindstrom's hands. But I do think Matheson needs somebody who can be a little bit more reliable just to make the safe play and allow Matheson to run free a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Gustav Lindstrom put in quite a few decent shifts on a third and second pairing after getting called up, but he really is like a seventh or maybe number six defenseman. And playing on a first pairing, despite getting pretty limited than special teams minutes, which keeps him a bit fresher, still is a little bit too much to ask from a player of his caliber.
Here's a question for you, Sebastian. What are your thoughts on Yoel Armia right now? Because he's a guy who's had, all the chances you think that maybe a guy should deserve, and he seems to come up, play really well for a stretch, and then kind of go back to the Armia that we're used to, where he's kind of lackadaisical. But tonight he pulled maybe the best move I've ever seen him pull. He was
Me too. Yeah.
spectacular on the penalty kill, and all season long, I know he's not playing. He's playing sheltered minutes, but all season long, his underlying numbers are spectacular. What should the
Yeah, I
Canadians do
mean,
with this guy?
Yoel Armia is one of the more fascinating case studies I've ever seen, especially with the Habs system. I wrote up like a scouting thread on him back in in March or February of this year, and just because he really is so interesting. And Yoel Armia is a player that never really learned to leverage his tools against compact defensive structures. He
Yep.
depends on it being wide open in the offensive zone to pull off his moves, whether it be the ridiculous steak that we saw today to cut to the middle of the slot, uh, or his overall goal scoring. It always does come against weaker sides where he's able to actually find space and has enough time to get his shot off because his shot is really dangerous, but
It
he lacks
is.
the tools to get it off in traffic. And it doesn't exactly have a hard nose for the slot, despite being a really strong like board battle player. For instance, he stays on the periphery quite a bit. So he's a player that, when given the space and the time and a good night's sleep, can look like prime Eric Lindros for about three shifts a game against weak opponents. And it's always very entertaining. I've quite enjoyed watching Yoel Armia play. I think that he's a really fun fourth liner to have at your disposal, and he's also a really strong penalty killer. So that gives him added versatility. But yeah, I think he could stick with the Habs, would be fine if they want to prioritize development of some players and get them NHL minutes. You can send him right back down to Laval because no one's claiming that contract at this point. So I don't know. Like, depends what the Habs want to do. Depends if Yoel Armia keeps playing the way he's playing right now, or if that drops back down to the Yoel Armia that we've also like the other Yoel Armia that we've gotten to know quite well over the last couple of years.
Yep.
Um, we'll see how it goes. But he is fascinating, and from a scouting perspective, just a really fun case study of what happens to some like high end draft picks that got picked like 20, like, top 20 overall, who had all the tools in the world, but could never quite do it at the NHL pace of like high level NHL opponents.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do like. I think the tough thing now about sending Armia down to the American Hockey League, if the Canadians get to a point where they're healthy enough to do so, which losing Tanner Pearson tonight, maybe that's not coming
Yeah.
anytime soon. Because it seems like no matter what they do, they find a way to get injured. This team is ridiculous. At the NHL level and the American Hockey League level, I think I find it hard to justify sending Armia down at this point over. I mean, I'm not saying send him down, but does anybody think that Armia is not outplaying Josh Anderson? Like,
I
seriously.
mean, look, Armia is currently providing more value than Anderson is, but once Anderson gets going, he will offer more value than Armia does. Like, we've seen
Theoretically.
Josh Anderson is as streaky a player as they come. Like, remember the entire season before he got traded to the Habs, he
Yep.
had like what, one goal in 26 games with Columbus after his 30-goal season. He is as streaky as they come. I remember like there was like a month of February 2 years ago where he was going like a goal a game pace for a full month. And I think it'll come with him. The key with Josh Anderson is he needs to more consistently not overextend rushes. That was why Slafkovsky looked so bad on his line for the entire like first month of the year, because Slafkovsky needs a methodical approach in transition where he can build up play with his line mates, and Anderson just sprints up the boards, loses possession, and has to go back all the time. But we're seeing Anderson like integrate some more delays into his rushes. Like we're seeing him hit the brakes and wait for his line mates a little bit more right now, which is promising, and at the very least is clinching to have some added offensive zone possessions. But yeah, I'd probably still keep Anderson in the lineup just because he provides an X factor of sorts that is present more than like one shift every blue moon, like it is with Armia. But yeah, with the Habs injury record, and I mean, they are so consistent at getting hurt. I don't think that's going
They
to
are.
really stop at any point soon. So
It's the most
he's going to
consistent
be
thing they
around.
do.
Consistency is key. It's the key to winning championships, and the Habs have adopted that in a interesting place.
They really have. It's interesting. Deshirin asks if Pearson's out long term, do the Habs finally call up Joshua Waugh? I'm gonna say I don't think so. I don't think they want to be in a situation where they're forced to call up Joshua Waugh. I think they're gonna bring up Joshua Waugh when they're good and ready, when they're putting him in a good situation and not a situation where it's like figure out how to build a line out of what we have left. I think they want to call him up when they have a spot for him ready for him to excel. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that we've seen the Habs hastily call up players, like young players from the AHL repeatedly over the last decade. And Joshua Roy, like we've seen the ups and downs already this season. Like the production's excellent. He's playing really good hockey. But there's been like hills and valleys in both the production and his shift to shift play this year. So he's maturing his game. He's still adapting to pro hockey. There's no rush to get him from a bad situation in Laval to a slightly less bad situation in Montreal, unless you really want to. And I don't think that like injury is the case. That's really going to make that happen for him, or really force Montreal's hand, because you have alternatives. Like Xavier Simoneau, I think, has earned a call up. He got like massacred with a massive hit today. A 6'5" guy jumped into his head with his shoulder, which
Jeez.
when a 6'5" player jumps to hit a 5'6" player, it's not ideal. But if
Yeah.
he's all right, if he's healthy, I think he's a pretty logical player to call up. He's in the vein of Raphael Harvey Pinard and Brendan Gallagher stylistically. Super high motor. You just plug him into your fourth line, and he's also going to give you like some really solid playmaking and like inner slot play in the offensive zone. He's a solid bumper, really versatile, but has that dog in him, which I think all Habs fans appreciate and Habs management appreciates. So if he's healthy, I think he's the most logical next call up. And I know it would make me and my good friend Hattie Kalakash very happy to see Simoneau in the NHL. So yeah, the Habs definitely have some options apart from Hua as well, and they don't have to rush him.
Yeah, Jean Simard mentioned Heineman as well. He's just returning from an injury, so they might want to let him cook for a little bit longer just to get his timing back. But I think he is a call up option. And I don't think he's a call up option right now, but we mentioned Laval. They won 5-1 earlier tonight, even with the big hit, obviously. And a guy that's coming on there that has had a tougher transition to the American Hockey League than Joshua Waugh, but Riley Kidney is finally starting to produce
Yeah.
points. He's up to 9 points in his last 10 games, 2 goals and an assist today. Really good to see him getting on the board as well because, he's not as all situations oriented, we'll say, as Joshua Waugh, but he's a guy who can put the puck in the net and who can make plays for his teammates. So seeing him get a little bit of confidence now, that's a good sign for the Canadians as well.
Oh, for sure. Kidney is really fun. Like he was a player that in his draft year in his D+1 and even well into his D+2, uh, really struggled to like access the middle of the ice. He was extremely peripheral in all of his offensive plays, which is especially an issue when you're playing at the QMJHL level, where slots are usually wide open and easy to exploit. But he's worked very closely with Adam Nicholas and has really, really opened up his game to being quite middle driven. And it's unlocked a lot more of his playmaking ability because he now has two flanks that he can really attack with his passing rather than just sticking to the perimeter and just really having that one cross ice option. So it's been great to see him kind of get going because it was a pretty slow start in terms of production. I think he had like 1 or 2 points in his first like 15 games.
Yeah, it was
But
tough.
yeah, it's getting started. Yeah, it was slow. He was playing like 4 or 5 minutes, pretty sheltered. But it's getting going now, and especially with a lot of Laval's players now in Montreal, there's actual offensive opportunities for him down there. So it's nice to see that he's running with it, and that first goal he scored tonight, it also clinched the teddy bear toss. So that must have been a cool experience too, to just be like flooded with teddy bears for scoring a goal.
Yeah, that's always a fun game. Although I'm sure that it takes a while to get all those teddies off the ice, which kind of hurts the flow, I'm sure. But the Rocket actually made it out of that one, so it was nice to see them win a game. It's been a tough stretch for Laval, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about uh, not necessarily the AHL, but we mentioned the Canadians calling up players, too early or willy nilly, not necessarily having a plan in the past. Let's talk about somebody who's made a fantastic transition, Jayden Struble. But first, another reminder, everybody who's here, please like the stream, subscribe to SDPN. If you really like it, well, hey, grab the link and share it on your favorite social media of choice. It helps to have lots of people in here and have fun, especially live, because then they get to interact with us. We get to read their comments. We get to adjust the show based on the wants and needs of our viewers. That's the coolest thing that we can offer in a live show streamed right to your computer or your phone or your tablet or heck, your TV too. So, Sebastian, let's talk about Jayden Struble because aside from just the mechanical precision that he plays the game with in terms of his decision making, he had one of the more impressive back checks I've seen this year on Tage Thompson, who is bigger than him, had a step on him, and isn't really a slow skater. He's a bit of a weird looking skater because he's so big, but he's not a slow skater. But Struble's speed burst to catch up with him and then out muscle the big man. Man, this kid is so impressive. Then he goes out and scores his first goal on a wild rush with two defensemen leading it, two defensive defensemen going on a rush and
And
scoring.
perfectly executed.
Right? He put this guy on the power
Yeah.
play all of a sudden, like he's been so unbelievably impressive. And what I kept hearing about Jayden Struble throughout his college career, his first year in Laval, was that he has all of the tools, but the mental game hasn't put everything together yet. It sure seems like it has now, and he's gone from a guy who might have been one of the forgotten guys on that defensive depth chart to the point where I think he's an NHLer. I don't want to ever see him go back to the AHL.
He has looked fantastic. And there was a lot of criticism with his development at Northeastern because he peaked offensively in his sophomore season. So he did not top that point total in either of his final two college seasons. And that said, his game developed tremendously in those years. And instead of kind of being molded into this like freak offensive defenseman that he could have been with his tools, like he had the mobility, he had the creativity coming out of prep, he had the confidence for sure. That was an option developmentally, but instead they decided to mold him more into a like solid two-way player, and he really refined his defensive game. And uh, at Northeastern, he became really one of the best breakout defensemen in the entire NCAA and in the entire Habs organization and their depth chart. And that's been very clear since his call up to Montreal, the calmness with which he's handled pressure on the breakout. We saw it even on his first goal where he retrieved the puck in the neutral zone and made a really deft little play to get the puck to Kovacevic before bombing up the middle lane to get in the tip to score the goal. He is very, very active. Jayden Struble is anything but passive on both sides of the puck. He tries to make things happen, but he's gained this element of control and decisiveness that really wasn't there as a draft eligible. He came straight out of prep hockey, and he was quite raw, and he was like going to be like a 4 to 6 year project, and he has been. But the payoff has been so interesting and quite different from the profile that he was drafted as.
Yeah, it's funny because we know that there's going to be moves on this blue line in the future, and we shouldn't get too attached to anyone. But I find myself
Yeah.
like right now, I think of the young defensemen who are currently in the NHL, Jordan Harris is probably on the bottom rung in terms of like most likely to be traded, right? He's probably the most likely to be traded. And then you've got your Strubles and your Xhekajs and your Barons, and then like Gooley's safe, Hudson's safe, Reinbacher's
Yeah.
safe, and you've got a bunch of other stuff that you aren't sure.
Engstrom,
Angstrom, right? Who looks like he could be a middle pairing
he's
defenseman.
fun.
Like right away, he's really really fun to watch. Really good player. But I'm kind of like a dragon, and I'm like hoarding my gold. I'm like, no one touch my defenseman. Like I like all these guys. I think that's what makes it really difficult. Is you don't want to fall in love with guys that you know there will be some moved out, but like on and off the ice, I really love Jordan Harris. Someone mentioned Struble, aside from being so strong to start the game, man, he's also pretty as hell. He is one handsome dude. So there's a lot of people who like him for that too. Like these players are extremely likable. Arber Xhekaj, extremely likable family, great story to root
Yeah.
for. It's gonna kind of suck and be bittersweet when some of these guys are moved on.
Certainly, right? Like that's the difficulty with being a big hockey fan and being attached to any specific team. There's always player movement. I think that the longer I do the scouting thing, the more I'm becoming a fan of like individual players than teams as a whole. I still am a Habs fan at heart, but I probably get more joy from seeing like Zach Benson's first career goal being in between the
Right.
legs after spending the entirety of the past year cheering him on and just like studying his game and loving every second of it. I get more joy from that than like I don't know if Christian Dvorak scored a brace for the Habs. Like that just wouldn't do it too much for me. But tonight's game was excellent. I really did enjoy. I think that the Slafkovsky shootout winner was just the perfect cherry on top to a beautiful game. As you said, Struble was fantastic, and he's a player that I would love to see stick it out in Montreal. He's so versatile. I'd love to see him just get an opportunity on the second power play unit at some point and just kind of see what he does with the puck. Because really going back to that sophomore year in college, he's really been like doubling down on practicing his off puck game. So trying to look back into his on puck game and seeing what he can create offensively would also be kind of fun to explore for the Habs. But yeah, lots of fun players to kind of look at after this game against Buffalo.
Yeah, and Mark Chiknita said Grace is a great point. He said, I was sad to see Romanov go, but it was an incredible deal. Let's hope for a few more like those. That's
Yeah.
the kind of thing that the Canadians have put themselves into with this many really strong defensive prospects, right? There's going to be situations where, like they can leverage this position of strength because defensemen are always in need in the NHL. There's just always a need for defensemen. So there's going to be some tough goodbyes, but they'll get some good returns too. All right, Jayden Struble is off, amazing, great game, but we also got to talk about Uri Slafkovsky. He has been a different player since they destroyed that line of him, Newhook, and Anderson, but it's gone to another level now, where to me he looks like a player on the verge of having a gigantic scoring streak. He's in that same element as Caulfield right now, where like everything they're doing is the right thing to do. The finishing just hasn't come yet. And then both of them obviously finish in the shootout tonight and win the game. It was a good feeling to see Slafkovsky pull off that nice move and get it to go for him because he's been doing everything but score lately.
He really has. Like his development since the start of training camp has just been funny to watch. Like when training camp started, Slafkovsky looked very much the same player from like a year and a half ago when he first broke in with the Habs, and that was not necessarily a good thing. But he has really worked on the small details in his game, and the small things really do unlock a lot. So, for instance, Slafkovsky, the big thing he struggled with last year was pre-scanning. He never scanned before he got the puck on his stick. So, whenever he'd get like a puck retrieval or reception in the neutral zone, he would be looking down at the puck and then would take about like a full beat before getting his head up and looking, and then he'd just get wrecked with a massive hit. And we saw him get injured because of it. So, I think that was a one massive issue in his game that Habs management should have kind of put a flag on and started him in the AHL to at the very least work on that before getting him to the NHL level. But this year, within like 3 or 4 weeks of the season starting, the amount of work he did on the scanning specifically trumps what he's done going back to the beginning of his draft year season. And that was quite stagnant the entire time in his development. It was a bigger concern that I personally had in his game. And it was like you just flip the switch and he starts pre-scanning, and then the dominoes started falling in line. When he started pre-scanning, he started being able to leverage his intelligence against NHL competition. And when he was able to do that, he was gaining confidence with the puck on his stick. And then things just started flowing his way once he became comfortable. And last season, there was always this angst when he had the puck on his stick. He's always nervous about getting hit because he got hit often. And ever since integrating these scanning habits into his game, he's really been a revelation for the Habs. And that stylistic fit on the Habs top line is just superb. I think that Caulfield and Suzuki aren't necessarily the most natural fit at 5-on-5, but Slafkovsky complements them both perfectly. He's able to get in and do all those board battles and do the dirty work on that line, which frees up Suzuki to kind of just drift off puck and find those openings and try to find that soft ice, which he does so well, and allows Caulfield to not really have to get too involved in the board battles because it's not a strength of his. And beyond that, his playmaking ability unlocks goal scoring for both of his teammates. And I'm still a big believer that the playmaking is Slafkovsky's biggest offensive tool, along with his handling. I think that the shot is very good, but the goal scoring instincts just don't quite compare to the playmaking instincts. And while I certainly agree he needs to shoot more because that will only like diversify his offensive toolkit and make him a lot less predictable with the puck on his stick, the playmaking I still think is going to be the jewel of that toolkit moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that we saw that when they had the Dvorak, Caulfield, Slafkovsky line together, and he put a lot of good pucks on Caulfield's stick and through Dvorak's feet because Dvorak doesn't pay attention when he's in the scoring position. But I digress. I know we got a comment here from Ben Dawson says Slav is consistently a step ahead of the play, a huge contrast to last year. I think that comes back to what Sebastian was saying with the scanning and the pre-scanning, right? You can't be ahead of the play if you don't know what's going on. And now he does, and you can see that the pieces falling together, right? And Trizak mentioned everything but scoring is kind of important, right? Of course, that is obviously true. But before the scoring begins for a player who is a project, these pieces have to fall into place, right? Like you have to do the right things to get the consistent scoring, or else you develop into a player who's like super streaky or extremely one note. And I think what's encouraging to me about this season in general, but Slafkovsky and Caulfield in particular, is along with like I know the finishing isn't there for either of them right now, but the offensive contributions are, and the defensive contributions for both are just wildly better than last year. Wildly better. And I know there was a game recently where Caulfield had like 4 or 5 defensive zone turnovers, but the
Yeah.
point is he's involved in exits now, right? He's not flying the zone just to score. He's involved in breaking up plays defensively. And once in a while, he throws a hit out there too. It's kind of fun. And you mentioned Slafkovsky being worried about getting hit. Now it seems like he's no longer worried about getting hit at all, and will just let
No.
guys go at him and shrug them off. His ability to forecheck this year is miles and miles beyond what we saw last year. How many times tonight did he take a hit to just create space for himself?
Exactly. Like I think the progression on that front is almost one of the most surprising things for me personally in his development because he was so afraid of getting hit last year. And tonight, for instance, I saw at least 3 different occasions in the offensive zone where he absorbed a hit, especially on the power play, to get a decent pass open into a passing lane that opened up because of that pressure that he drew in. And he's absorbing that contact comfortably. He doesn't look at all afraid of taking a hit to make a play. And yeah, I think that the progression's just been like again very funny for me to watch over the past 2 months, just because he's now displaying all the tools and skills that I've seen in him going back to his draft year, but that you really only ever saw him put together in like these tiny little spurts in very specific international tournaments, which helped him get picked first overall. And after a pretty slow start to the season on a line where he had, I mean, I don't think you can find two less complimentary players in the Habs lineup than Josh Anderson and Yuri Slafkovsky stylistically.
I know.
So he was not in a good position in that line. And especially because Alex Newhook isn't a natural center, does not really help the equation because you saw
Yep.
Slafkovsky be like the main defensive player on that line, dropping low in the defensive zone, and then you just have Newhook and Anderson sprinting up the ice when Slafkovsky's still stuck by his own crease, right? He can't really play that way. But
No.
ever since he got moved to a line where he has a well-defined role, and that was when he got moved with the Dvorak and Caulfield, everything's just been falling into place. And again, he's developed so hilariously in that span. As soon as he got a role that he could build his strengths around, and that wasn't just abstract, give it your best shot, sport, go over the boards. Uh, it's starting to fall into place now, and you're seeing him get really targeted development both from Martin St. Louis and from Adam Nicholas, which I think is really smart from the organization because those are some really, really smart hockey minds, and you want them to work with your highest potential young players. And Slafkovsky is most certainly that. So he's been getting that targeted development, the one-on-one video and skating sessions. So I'm very excited to see how it continues this season for Slav. And as you mentioned earlier, it really does feel like a point streak is just above the horizon for him.
Yeah, it really does. And I really have to credit him for putting in the work and the Canadians for sticking to their plan. And I don't want to take a victory lap yet, but I will say all the folks who are saying that he like had to go to the AHL when he was on that Anderson Newhook line. And my point, I know there were some big arguments that happened on Twitter that my whole point was they need to give him another option and different line mates before they throw in the towel and send him down. I gotta say, right now I'm looking like I was right. They threw him a lifeline, and he took that rope and pulled hard, and he is on that boat right now. He's going in the right direction. Even if he's getting hit by refs, he's taking hits, he's making plays. Uh, Before his
He's
fight
fighting.
tonight, yeah, before his fight
Yeah.
tonight, he got knocked by a ref. Like he was trying to get the puck, and the ref took him out. And I guess he was so frustrated he decided to fight the Sabres player. I don't know, but gotta hand it to him. Great game from Slafkovsky tonight. All right, let's take some questions from the chat. I'm excited to chat with everyone tonight a little bit because it's been like two times that I've been on for like the last 3 weeks. I'm out of practice in running a stream. It's been all Mark all the time while I've dealt with illnesses and school strikes and parents visiting and all this stuff. So let's get some questions in. I'm going to look through here and see if we've got any good questions for Sebastian. While I'm looking, Sebastian, can you tell us how do you feel about Cole Caulfield's season so far?
I mean, it's a matter of time for him. He's definitely still Cole Caulfield. I've liked him more this season than I did last season. I think that, as you
Same.
mentioned earlier, the defensive game has really grown a lot. I think that he's becoming a lot more dynamic with the puck on his stick on the power play. Where last over the last 2 seasons, he was basically on auto shoot mode every single time he was laid up for a shot on the power play. He's been like looking for playmaking options a lot more. He's been making quick one two passes with Suzuki and Matheson to shift the defensive box that I wasn't seeing much last season. And he's shooting at under 6%. And this is Cole Caulfield we're talking about, who's probably used to shooting well over 10%. So uh, it's a matter of time. He's gotten really unlucky. He's hit quite a few posts recently. He had at least, I think, 9 shots on target in this game
Yep.
against Buffalo, which is just funny. So like I think that Caulfield's doing just fine, and especially playing on this line now with Slafkovsky and Suzuki, his goal tally is gonna rocket up pretty soon. I'm not very concerned about that.
Yeah, 9 shots on net tonight, 12 individual shot attempts, eight
Yeah.
scoring chances. You got a rebound attempt. Like he's gonna start scoring. It's gonna happen. I do think there's probably some like calibration issues with like the surgically repaired shoulder where things are mostly the way they should be, but there's like a little bit that's off, and that's affecting his finishing maybe. So maybe like that's more like that's a part of it aside from the luck. But in comparison to last year or the year before, he's creating more shots, more scoring chances, more high danger chances. He's getting to better areas. So I'm just not worried. I think everyone who is worried needs to take a little bit of a chill pill, just like the Arber Xhekaj thing. Jean Samard says, is Colby Armstrong a garbage color commentator? Yes or yes. I wasn't a fan of him continually justifying late hits, but I will say, at the very least, he seemed to be watching the game, which is something that a few color commentators who we seem to regularly get with the Canadians don't appear to do. They're a little bit sleepy, so I'll give Colby that.
Yeah, I'll limit my comment to I thought it was pretty funny when we got the insight after that like double cross check from Brendan Gallagher on Jeff Skinner, where he was asked, did he already have that in his rookie season? And Colby Armstrong just started laughing because of course he had that in his rookie season.
Yeah.
Gallagher's never been one to shy away from physical contact, especially one that's in the gray area if you're generous, like that play was. So that was entertaining at the very least.
Yeah, I think if you're ever wondering if Brendan Gallagher has always been Brendan Gallagher, you can go watch the highlights of when he was playing in the brick tournament when he was like 9 or 10 or something like
Yeah,
that. And like
same
immediately
player.
crashes the goalie, like immediately he's hitting guys. It's it's Brendan Gallagher through and through. He's never been different than what he is now. Let's see here. Deshaun said Cole is poised to have a massive scoring streak. Shooting percentage way too low. I agree. Sorry, excuse me. Ryan Dodd says, how much of a benefit is it to play left shot D on the left and vice versa? Could there be a benefit to left shot D on the right, similar to how wingers are deployed these days? I think that's a great question. I think that there's benefits and drawbacks of both. Offensively, I think playing on your offside can open up a lot of avenues for you, but defensively and also like holding the blue line along the wall, it is a little bit more difficult. And just your stick position is different, right? When you have your stick in one hand and you're poking, it's a little bit different to be on your offside. What do you think, Sebastian?
I've always found that it comes down to a player's style a little bit with how comfortable they are on their
Mm-hmm.
offsides. Like fully agree. In the offensive zone, I love seeing defensemen swap spots and create more dangerous shooting lanes and set each other up for one timer options and so on and so forth. But defensively, when you're a player like, for instance, Cayden Primeau or Alexander Romanov, who has a lot of their value come from being like suffocating in defending transition and really just snuffing out everything on their side of the ice. I think it can actually like be a bit of a mistake to have them on their offsides because it makes them a lot weaker in defending plays up the boards. So if you were playing Cayden Primeau on the right side, for instance, you'd see a lot more players get by him just by virtue of being able to get the puck through that little hole on his right side between his stick and the boards, where it's a bit more uncomfortable with your backhand. So I think it depends on the situation, but I'm not a believer that it really should be a rule that you go by that you have to keep your left shots on the left and right shots on the right. I think that there are benefits to mixing and matching and going for stylistic pairings rather than just handedness pairings. Like I think that Jayden Struble could do just fine on the right, and you pair him with a guy like Mike Matheson, and you have like the best transition defenseman pairing that you've seen Habs jersey in a long time, which would be enjoyable to watch.
I'm
Would
for
it
this.
would be
I'm for
spreading
this.
out that ability, but it would be entertaining, and I think that there are players that can excel on that side. So Arber Xhekaj is another one where yes, transition defending is a strength, but it's mainly because he plays the body rather than the stick first. Whereas Gouli is like, despite being violent, is quite dedicated to being a stick first player, which I love in my defenseman. So it does depend on the style a little bit and on the strengths, but in general, you can mix and match and just see what fits because you do see left shots excel on the right and vice versa. Like Jordan Harris, I like quite a bit on his offside. I think he's really solid there and is one of the many reasons I'd love to see the Habs hang on to him. I think he offers excellent versatility in a bottom pairing.
Yeah, I do too. I really like Jordan Harris. Jim Neal says Mike Johnson's the best color man in the league. I absolutely adore Mike Johnson, both professionally and
Makedoni.
personally. He's been a great person to me. That has been on multiple of my shows. before. I want to get him on this show. However, I think he's been dethroned. I think the best color person in the league is Cheryl Pounder. She just
Ooh,
is.
that's a hot take.
She's so good. She's so
She's
good.
excellent.
Like Mike Johnson's right there. Like it is 1-2, very very close. But I really like what Cheryl Pounder brings. I find her perspective is so unique and nuanced in the hockey world. And another riser for me is Frankie Corrado. He's probably like number 3 right now for me.
I still have McDonough at number one. I'm a quite dedicated RDS viewer for my Habs games, and I don't think that any duo can really compare to Pierre-Louis and McDonough in
Ugh.
terms of a commentary.
There's no play-by-play person in the league that can
No,
compare to Pierre Hood. I don't even think it's
he's the voice
close.
of my childhood. I grew
Yeah,
up with his voice.
voice of a
It is
generation.
nostalgic through many generations at this stage.
That's true.
Uh,
Good point. Good point. Let's see here. What else have we got? King of the. Oh no. Let's see. What else? Any other questions? Do goalies have the book out on Caulfield? No. Trisac. No. They don't have the book on Caulfield. Colin
he went
McDonald
five
says
hole tonight, which goes against the book at the very least
that's
in the
true.
shootout.
Colin McDonald, what might the Habs get in return for Allen closer to the trade deadline? I think that really depends on what the situation is, right? I know it's not a satisfying answer, but how desperate are the teams? You know, like if Jack Campbell falters in his call up back to the NHL, the Oilers are probably a lot more desperate than if he is just okay, right? If Skinner starts to struggle again, they'll get a little bit more desperate. You kind of hope that more goalies start to struggle. I wouldn't rule out the Carolina Hurricanes looking for a goalie either. It seems like they're having big troubles with injuries.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think with Jake Allen, my guess is he fetches like a third round draft pick or something
Yeah,
comparable to
it's not
that,
going to
which
be
is what the
huge.
Habs paid for him. Yeah, like I think like goalies in general really go for a lot less than you might expect based off of their impact on a game, and that's due to the inconsistency between seasons for goaltenders being so erratic. So you never really see teams like shelling out and paying the big bucks for goalies, especially in the last like, 2 seasons. So I think if the Habs are able to fetch a third round draft pick for Jake Allen, who still has a decently like large cap hit next season that you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind necessarily getting rid of and running a cheaper tandem, could make sense for sure for the Habs. But I think like a mid round pick, like I think third is like hopeful and fourth is like the expected for me.
Yeah, I think where you might get a bigger return for Jake Allen is if it's the Canadians taking money back. So, like, I don't really want the Canadians to take on Jack Campbell's contract, but if they were to send Campbell to Edmond or send Allen to Edmonton, sorry, and take Campbell back, then maybe you're getting a big payout from Edmonton to take on that
You would be,
contract, right?
yeah.
Yeah, like you're probably getting like Borgo or something like that. It would be, I think, significant to get rid of Jack Campbell's contract. It would have to be.
Borgo isn't the biggest piece. Like he's 22 years old and he's struggled to get over half a point a game in the AHL. He's not the player that I'd be targeting. I mean Edmonton's prospect pool is barren. Like it really is a
Yeah,
barren landscape there.
it's
But
tough.
you got like the only two players I think I'd be like interested in from the House perspective. Well, one's a left shot defenseman, so big grain
Not
of
that
salt
one.
there. Bo Akey, ton of fun. He's out for the season though, which makes him cheaper to get by trade. Was just drafted. Really great transition defender. He's like Brett Kulak, but better projection. So he's a ton of fun. But again, left shot defenseman is definitely not a position of need for the Habs, especially for young players. And the other one's Dylan Holloway. I think
Yeah,
he'd be an interesting fit. Doesn't project as much more than 3C, but could fill in like and swap like in for Dvorak once Dvorak's gone. But I think like a draft picks are really what you'd be aiming for there. Like try to loosen out a first and a third or something. Like you at the very least get a first round pick for taking on the Campbell contract. Looking at like past cap dumps, but yeah, you wouldn't be getting that value because of Jake Allen.
yeah. And a last question of the night. There's a couple good ones in here, but it's just we've already gone an hour here. Ben Dawson asks, have we talked about PK's interview for CBC Gem? No surprise, 2014 Team Canada coach was Mike Babcock, where PK mentioned that he was told that he wasn't allowed to celebrate if he scored a goal while playing for Team Canada. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Mike Babcock. I wouldn't be surprised if that was somebody else in Hockey Canada either. We don't know. I'm glad PK is talking about it. I think that's my biggest takeaway, because watching PK Subban's career with great interest, as he was flat out my favorite player, um, I thought that he was just going to keep his head down and push through everything and never really talk about the bullshit, because he dealt with a lot that was swept under the rug, not just from his own team in the Montreal Canadiens or from Hockey Canada, but also, frankly, from referees. I think if you look back at PK Subban's early career, he's a rough and tumble guy. He gets in players' faces. He's an agitator. He's going to take a lot of penalties. I don't think he should have been the eighth most penalized player in the league during his prime. I think that's completely horseshit. And there were several moments that were caught on. I don't know if you remember the show 24CH when they used to
Oh
do
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
There was one where he was mic'd up for a game, and there was a play where he got tripped up behind the net while he was trying to like clear the puck and ended up icing the puck. And the guy's stick came up, and the blade of his stick caught him right in the throat, and he bolts to the bench. He think like he can't breathe for a second. He's scared. He goes to the bench, and the ref comes over and just absolutely chews him out for going to the bench. And he was like, "I thought I was injured." And he was like, "No, you get back out on the ice and you tell me thank you, sir, for not giving you a penalty." And I was like, "Whoa, that's
Oh.
I don't think you'd say that to most players, man. That's pretty messed up." So I think there's a lot of things about
That's
PK's
bad.
career
Yeah.
that would be very interesting for people to know. And a lot of his accomplishments are downplayed, frankly, because he's a loud black dude. Like, people
Oh
talk
my
about
God,
his
of course. Like,
2013
yeah,
Norris
for
as
sure.
a fluke, as if he wasn't nominated or like top five in Norris voting for the next 3 or 4 years straight. Like, he was a fantastic
Yeah.
player.
Tremendous. I mean, I have like the favorite jersey I have in my very very small limited collection of like three or four Habs jerseys is my 2016 Winter Classic PK Subban jersey, which is just gorgeous. And he was definitely one of my favorite players growing up as well. I mean, I started watching the Habs like a year or two before PK kind of came onto the scene, so I really watched with curiosity and enjoyment his entire career play out, and the amount of racism that he faced for being flamboyant and not being a quiet black man, and being loud and being a human being with a personality. Yeah, it definitely shown a lot of light still on the extent of racism in the hockey establishment, whether it be within the Habs organization specifically, or the refereing, or so on and so forth, Hockey Canada, and basically every single level that he played at, right? So we've seen this very visibly in his case, and I think that him talking out about it and being vocal is important to make sure that like this generation of young black hockey players have somebody that is talking back to power, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Thanks, Sebastian, for joining us here tonight. Thanks, everyone, for coming in live. We had a great stream with you all. It's so fun to be back on, even though I can barely get words out, and I'm just trying not to cough the whole time I'm on here. I feel like I've done all
You
right.
did great.
Yeah, I've muted the mic a few times to try to get one out, but for the most part, I think we managed. Thanks everyone for showing up. We'll be back tomorrow night. It's a back to back, so I don't know. Maybe I'll hit Sebastian up again. We'll be back to back, but we'll see. All right, everyone, have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow night.